And with that, I am going to turn it over to Will, and he can proceed with the presentation. Will.
Thanks a lot, Andy. So one advantage of using the virtual meetup over the public meetup is it's a lot easier to quickly drop one source out and drop another one in without having to mess with cords or anything like that. So that's a nice perk. So yeah, I'm doing a presentation today on building Discord and Slack bots in Ruby because we were starting to talk to ourselves anyway. So basically, for me, it was an idea to spruce up sort of those online remote communication communities that you spend a lot more time with when you can't see each other face to face. And for me, I started playing a new computer game. I've been playing a lot more computer games lately than I had when I was able to spend more time outside. And I found that there was one particular thing that people would constantly be asking each other questions about, like it's kind of a role-playing game, and people were asking, where can I find this piece of equipment, and what level do I need to be to get this thing? And a lot of people were just waiting, spending time depending on people to provide that information for them, when you could very easily build a service to provide that information for people quickly. So that's what inspired me to do this. And I hope that my presentation inspires other people to see how they can improve their social spaces in other ways. So we'll start by talking about what you can do with a chatbot. So services like GitHub, YouTube, Giphy, they already have great Slack integrations, and a lot of them have good Discord integrations as well. But if your team relies on any tools that don't, why not build the app yourself? There's plenty of tools for you to pull in, and all it takes is a little bit of time and a little bit of imagination on how you can improve things for your groups. So serving useful or entertaining info, that's tied in pretty well with the example that I'm going to show you pretty shortly here. Essentially, you can hook a database up to your bot and use queries sort of as chat commands for your users to ask that bot for information. Games is another interesting thing. Now, text-based role-playing games, I think, can work really well here. And I've seen some pretty cool examples, and you can get really creative with things like having a private chat between you and the bot for your sort of private personal game area, and then a shared room where collective action takes place. And again, I've seen some pretty cool examples of that. And another thing is you could study what people talk about and collect information about that. Now, some people might get a little bit hesitant about the idea of sort of wholesale communications collection. But if you can get over that, there is some pretty cool information that you can start making, pulling cool information from about what people talk about, how, and even like make a formal study about how communication works in online spaces. So that could be pretty cool too. So what do we need to do this? First of all, we're going to be building in Ruby, so we have the great Ruby Gems library, or sorry, collection of libraries to pull information, to pull code in for our application. So the ones that we're going to focus the most on are Slack Ruby bot and Discord RB. Now you can choose either one of those things to build your app around, and you actually could, as I'm going to show you pretty soon, build an app that uses both of those and just either pick one when you run the application that you want to actually load, or you could use a task runner, for example, like Foreman, to run both of them in parallel and actually just run two different bots off of the same code base. So that could be pretty cool. You're going to need an API key for either Slack or Discord, and I will put the slides here into the YouTube description down below here when the video goes live after it's recorded. And those links will help you get started on where to get your own API keys. Also, if you go to the GitHub pages for Slack, Ruby Bot, and Discord RB, they do walk you through that process pretty well too. Now, when it comes to hosting, you don't need a web server. You don't need an app server or a web server like Puma and Nginx to serve pages individually to your users, because you're having the app talk directly to these Slack and Discord APIs. So all you really need is a computer that can run Ruby and an internet connection. And you could either use your own machine to host this bot if you can keep it on all the time, or you could use a service like Heroku. I've got a DigitalOcean droplet that I use Doku on, and that's where I pushed my bot to. But really, the requirements are very low, and getting it set up with something like Heroku is pretty easy. You do have to keep in mind, if you're on a free plan with Heroku, they do shut your app off after about 30 minutes of inactivity, and you'd have to either run a script to keep it awake or manually turn it on every time that you want to use it, which is a little bit of a pain. So optionally, we could use a database. And the really cool part about using Ruby for a project like this is we can use some of the gems that are part of the Rails framework without using Rails itself. For example, Active Record is very helpful in helping us talk to our database and easily collect and combine information. So we can use the Active Record gem. And when we use that without Rails, we're going to need something to create our migrations, which we use standalone migrations for. And you'll need a database, of course, and the gem for it, like PG or MySQL. Any other API sources that you want to bring in, if you want to connect to the YouTube API, the GitHub API, any public service that has a public API, you could connect to and use that to enhance and enrich your own bot. And if you want, you could build a full Rails project out of it. There's no reason why you couldn't. You could integrate into a website or a web application if you have one, and have it trade information back and forth between your chat community and your online community, your web community. So this is basically a walkthrough of what happens when you run your Discord or Slack bot. First of all, it takes the API token that you provided it and authenticates with Slack or Discord. And that's kind of, instead of it having its own individual user account, it connects in this way and appears in your channel as if it's a person. The bot joins your channel by invite. And while it's running, it's actually listening to all of those text messages that get sent through the chat program. And you have a chance to, when it receives a message, take a look at what it is, parse it, do whatever you want, and respond to it with any kind of information, any mutation. You could just take all of the text that people send in and type it back in Pig Latin if you want. But you could really, the sky's the limit, and the only limit is your imagination. So here's a quick example. This here for the Slack bot itself is a self-contained and fully complete Slack bot. So this class, all it has to do is provide any code blocks that will, when the messages come in, check them, do any transformations, and make any response. So here we're using a match for the regular expression community, case insensitive, taking in the client data and match parameters into this block. And if we have a match with community, it'll send the text 6 seasons and a movie. And if you have the Giphy integration that is supported by the Slack Ruby bot, it'll also send a Troy and Abid GIF. And if anyone doesn't get that reference, you're hugely missing out. And where have you been, by the way? But yeah, that's really all it takes. You just start the bot. There are different types of bots that you could provide, whether it's a command bot, whether it's something you have to directly talk to and ask for information, or whether it's actually seeking the text for specific matches. And really from there, you can sort of do whatever you want with that information. I'm going to break this down really quickly. So the client is information about the connection. That's you, or your bot rather, and the chat system itself. The data is anything about the message, so where it was said, who it was said by, and anything like that. And the match is your actual string that you're catching from the user, and you can kind of parse that and spit it back out if you want, or use it in any way, store it to your database. And it's pretty much up to you. So that's generally an overview of how everything works. Now I'm going to actually show you an example of an app that you could build fairly quickly, I might add as well. And then we might try extending it a little bit if we have some time. So I'm going to quickly pull up my other view here. Just give me a second. So keep in mind, this is meant to be very beginner friendly, And I want to help encourage people to do interesting things on their own. So if there's anything you need a little bit of time to digest or need a little bit more explanation about, just ask in the chat. It's hard for me to keep an eye on it, but I'm sure Andy will be keeping a look. And if there are any questions that he needs to relay to me, please feel free. I'm here to make this easy for you. Twilio, yeah, you could probably use Twilio. You could do IRC. I'm sure there's an IRC gem out there that you can make an integration with. So just let me pull up. Okay, so this is the directory for the bot. Pretty standard here, and actually a lot of things when you use things like standalone migrations to pull a database into your project, it encourages you to use a very Rails-like app structure. But as we usually do when we're learning how a new application works, we're going to take a look at the gem file and talk about its dependencies. So here I've got Active Record. As I mentioned, I'm going to be connecting to an Active Record service to grab information from my users. Now, we've got the Discord RB and the Slack RubyBot gems, both, which can be toggled back and forth from, depending on which one we want to run. And then the async WebSocket, that's part of the Slack RubyBot dependencies. Now, I don't know why it doesn't get pulled in automatically when you include Slack RubyBot, but that's there for that. And then we have Postgres and standalone migrations, again, to support our database side of things. And there's one more gem here that isn't required, but I want to actually give a quick shout out to, and that is Creek. What that does and why I needed it is for the game that I was building this bot for, there was a lot of information that the community had put together and put into a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that I wanted to be able to use in my app. And you can actually very easily use this gem Creek to read through the spreadsheet line by line in order for you to populate your own database. So I actually just wrote a quick and dirty script here, this parse RB, and it's not the cleanest code just because I only needed to run it once and then I never need it again. But basically what it does is loads, parses, and puts together all of the information to fill the database with all the information that there was in this game about all of the equipment that you could get. So that was the gem file. We're going to talk about the rake file real quick. Now, this is the standalone migrations rake tasks, which we get provided to us with that standalone migrations gem. And also, I just wrote a quick task for running the app altogether. So you just type rake in the console and it runs the app however you've configured it. Finally, we have the proc file. If you're going to be hosting on Heroku, it's basically just, this is how you treat my application. And this is sort of its signal for what type of application it is. When you say web task rake, that basically tells it this is a Ruby app, treat it like a Ruby app so that when you push it up, it'll act as properly. So we're going to talk about the database briefly. This is the spreadsheet that I pulled the database from. So when you use standalone migrations, it actually makes migrations that look just like Rails migrations. In fact, they're practically identical. We've got creating a table. Here's the list of all of our columns. We've got the types, and we've got that for both the weapons and for the accessories. So I do refer to the schema every once in a while when I'm putting my my queries together so I know what's available to me and sort of how it's formatted. But I do try and follow a pretty typical standard. Everything's in lowercase, single words if possible. And when there are abbreviations, try to be as consistent as you can. So the lib folder here is split into 3 subfolders and the dragonbot.rb file. So I'm going to briefly, this game is for, sorry, Matt, this is for a game called Dragon Mark for Death. If you can imagine Mega Man combined with a loot-based RPG multiplayer game like Diablo or Borderlands, it's kind of like a meshing of those two. It's actually really fun and really dorky, which is, of course, the best. Okay, so I'm going to quickly talk about the dragonbot.rb. Now, this is basically just the file that pulls in all of our requirements, sets up the database, and runs either the Discord bot or the Slack bot. And all we do to pick which one we run is uncomment that line, run rake. And we do get some warnings, and that is because some of the gems require older versions of, for example, active record that don't quite follow the upcoming Ruby 3.0 conventions. So it's going to complain about that. But yeah, that's basically all you need to do to run the app. And I'll show you how it actually runs in practice later after I finish walking through how it works. So we've got our database configuration. That is basically in, where is that? The config.yaml. Doing some pretty standard and maybe not crazy safe stuff here, but we've got the database URL in production. The username is going to be the name of the app. And the database itself is Dragon Ball production and development. It's pretty much the same, but development. We're going to make a connection with active record, and we're using that .env environment file, which I'll show you a quick example of, to pick which environment we're in. And then this basically just loads the individual bots, the helpers, and the models. So the core of the app is actually sort of code that we didn't have to write because active record is so helpful for us there. So the models and how that talks to the database is all pretty much taken care of by these super thin, super minimal files here. We just we pull in some helpers, which I'll explain a little bit in a moment. We define our individual classes, and that's pretty much all there is to it. There's not a lot of conversation to this database. We're only really pulling information from it because people aren't adding stuff individually. Now, these classes might get a little bit more complicated when we get to that. But for the most part, very, very basic, just describes this is an active record item. So one thing that I did do to make things a little bit simpler is include this equipment mix-in. And if anyone's new to Ruby and isn't really familiar with the idea of modules and mix-ins, a module is basically just a collection of methods that you can either call on their own as a module method, or you can mix those modules into another class in order for you to be able to call them as if they're part of that class. So when we say require the helper's equipment, we're saying that when we include equipment in weapons, weapon kind of inherits all of the qualities of what equipment is, and any of the things that equipment can do, a weapon can do. So let's take a quick look at that helper here. So all this basically does is allow us to easily combine different database columns to make it into a easily digestible format for our sort of our chat interface. This does run very well serverless in a Docker container, and I'll explain that a bit later. So basically this says that all pieces of equipment have stats and they have classes. So they have stats that they could increase or decrease, and they have a list of classes that they are capable of being equipped on. So I'm going to quickly run through these line by line, just so people who are a little bit newer to Ruby kind of can understand what's going on here. So when you take a list and reduce it, basically what you're doing is you're running through that list and allowing you to kind of combine a normal iteration with taking a result from each of those steps and combining them together. So here we're just making a result starting with that blank string, and for each of the accessories that we go through, or the pieces of equipment that we go through, we're taking something from that and adding it to that string. So here it's just going to take all of the different stats that show up in the database and put them side by side in a string together, sort of concatenated with the tab character, and then strip to remove the last one at the end. Classes does a very similar thing. In the database, they're just stored as Boolean. So we'll quickly jump over to the schema and I'll show you. We've got, these are the different classes in the game, and whether it is true or false means can that character equip that piece of equipment. So we go back to piece of equipment, and for this list of all of the different classes that are available, this will cut through that and let us know sort of a list of all of the different classes that are capable. So we can sort of turn a list of Boolean values into a list of names. And with that mix-in, we can add those to both the accessory and the weapon classes. So we don't have to write those same methods over and over again each time that we come up with a new piece of equipment that someone can put on their character. So that is the equipment module, and that is specifically for mixing in with the weapon and accessory classes. But we also have format, and this here is mostly just to help us combine all of the individual lines of information about a piece of equipment and make it into a block of text that our bot can actually send to the user. And how they handle blocks of text is, for Discord, it's going to be an array of strings, and each string is a different line. So when you pop each of those individual lines onto the event, and I'll sort of show you how that works in a second here, that actually sort of relays that individual string to the user. And in a block of in a response block, you're going to be popping or pushing things onto that event array over and over again until you're finished sending your message. Slack works a little bit differently. Slack, you can actually send an entire block of text that is separated by the new line character. So in that case, we can still use an array of strings and just concatenate them together with the new line. So we use join to do that. And again, I'll show you that. But this is, for me, useful methods that help us convert the data into texts that is going to be interesting to the users. So we've got our title. If we go format.title and any string, it's just a quick custom command that'll make every single word in that string a capital word. And equipment info here, so we're taking the title of the equipment name using that first method here, the required level, so the equipment.level. And now this is sort of going to be, in the case of those individual weapons or accessories, going to be weapon.name or accessory.name, accessory.level. It's going to give you the list of classes that can equip that piece, the stats, and that is actually going to be from our equipment helper there. And if the piece of equipment has an element, it's going to give you that, and if it has bonuses, it's going to give you that as well. So those are basically the core of the application. All of the logic of what needs to be done, how to do it, and anything that needs to be calculated, put together, is done separated away from the sort of interface layer. And we want to keep the interface layer where we're talking to Discord or talking to Slack as light as possible so that we can reuse that code in either side. But now that we've gone through kind of like the heart, we'll go to the skin and how we actually present that information to the users. So we'll start with the Discord bot here, which I actually have running live, and I can show you an example of running after I run through what exactly it's meant to do. So we inherit from the Discord RB commands command bot, and there's different types of bots depending on what you actually want to do. And in this case, we want to just listen for specific commands and respond accordingly according to those specific commands. So this isn't going to be like a sort of reading all of the text and spitting back answers when it finds something it wants to respond to kind of bot. This is going to be, we define a prefix, we make a list of commands, and anytime that prefix is followed by one of those commands, it'll give the appropriate response. So here we have, when we initialize the bot, we have to pass it a prefix, which is that sort of signal that the user is trying to talk to the bot right now. When we run the run command, it just sets up all these commands by running through each of these individual blocks to sort of add it to the combination of commands that are available to the bot. And this is a full example command. So when we pass the symbol weapon here, that's saying that that's the word that we're kind of having it listen to after that exclamation point prefix. So if someone types exclamation point weapon, this command knows my time to shine. So if they just type exclamation point weapon without any text afterward, they're just going to get this response back, because arguments, which is anything that they put after the command, that's sort of like the variable that they're passing to us, doesn't have anything in it. So we in this case are going to interpret them as, I don't know how to use this. How do I use this? It's going to take the arguments there afterward and combine all of them together, lowercase, because we don't want to trust that the user is not going to use uppercase or mixed case. We want to make sure that we're going to match what they meant to say with what we actually have in the database. We're going to combine that together and use Active Directory, that weapon class, to find a matching object with the same name. If they find it, we use that really cool format command that we made before in the format mixin to return the title or any further equipment information if we actually do find that weapon in our database. So as I mentioned before, the way that you talk to a Discord server and the way you talk to a Slack server are a little bit different. For Discord, we use this event object. Now, similar to the case of the Slack, where we do have that data parameter that gets passed in, event is very much the same sort of thing, where it's information about who said what, where they said it, and the time that they said it. But it is also our interface in this case. It's sort of like our client connection, like client is in the Slack side. So when we want to send a message, what we do is we push that string to the event, and it interprets that, us storing something in that array, as I want this to go out to the user. So you can do it any old place in your command, in your command block. It could you could do it multiple times. You could do it right at the end. But one thing that I noticed is, if at the end you also return a string, it's going to return that string too. So I return nil at the end just to be like, no, I'm done. Stop listening to me. You don't need to add any more of this. So the weapon command and the accessory command are pretty much the exact same thing, and they work practically the same in the Discord bot and the Slack bot. So I'm going to go and jump over and show you the corresponding Slack command for that weapon. So as I said, works pretty much the same way, but we're dealing with different parameters and a different interface. We have the client, which in this case is our connection. We have the data, which is anything that we want to know, and the match, which is our input string, more or less. So just the same as before, we're going to find our Active Directory object. If it doesn't exist, here's how you communicate on the Slack side. Instead of pushing onto an array, you're going to use client.say. That's in the client connection. I want to say this. And you list the channel and the text. So interestingly, with the Slack bot, and you might be able to do this with the Discord bot as well, but I haven't found out how to do that yet. You can actually decide to send a response in a different channel than you actually receive the message from. You could, for example, send someone a private message in response to the public message that they sent you in a certain channel to keep things sort of tighter together and not clutter up the chat. You could also use threaded messages, for example, if you wish. So that is pretty much it for how the bot works altogether. And I'm going to give a quick demonstration of the bot running, and then we're going to try adding a little bit of extra to it together. So let's go ahead and switch windows here. Actually switch though. Okay, so as I mentioned, I do have this running in a Doku instance right now. So people were asking in the chat if it's something that you can easily run on a serverless service. Absolutely, because that's what I'm currently doing. So we've got the bot running and it's joined the channel. And as I as I demonstrated, in order to talk to this bot, you want to use the trigger, which is the exclamation point in this case. Let's say I want a weapon, and I want to know about the, oh, I don't know, what's a weapon from that game now? Let's say longsword. It's going to parse that. It's going to see if there's anything in the database that matches that, and it might not actually be online. Hold on a second here. Yeah, you know what? I think I did stop. I'm actually just going to start the version that I have locally hosted here because I can guarantee that will work. So uncommenting the Slack bot.run. Sorry, not Slack, Discord. We've run rake. Our default command is just to run dragonbot.rb. And now it should be on our channel. Oh, it actually did get our old command. Just took a little while to come back to it. So that might be the thing where, you know, the app could have gone asleep because I'm using a Heroku instance or something like that. But here, both the bot that I have locally hosted and the bot that I have hosted on my DigitalOcean droplet both responded to the help command at the same time. So you actually can run the same instance multiple times, and the API keys do allow that. And now they are both responding. So now that you've seen what the actual result looks like, we can quickly dissect how that is happening. Again, I have to switch windows. This is a little slower to switch windows than I was hoping it'd be. But we're going to spend a little bit more time looking at how to do it because we're going to write our own response command next. So sort of from beginning to end, when the Discord bot gets the command, it checks if the arguments are empty. If not, it tells you how to use the command. Then it's going to convert to downcase, all of those arguments joined together with a space, because that's how we're going to search on the database. They are spaced out, they are lowercase. If there's a +1 at the end, of course, it'll leave that alone. And then the format. So let's quickly go over to the format helper. And notice that it's actually doing a little bit of not quite Markdown, but similar to Markdown, where we've got the asterisks here when we want to bold something, and we have got the underscores here when we want to italicize something. Now, interestingly, there is some difference between how Discord and Slack handle formatting as well. For Discord, double asterisks for bold, underscores for italics. In Slack, single asterisks for bold and underscores for italic. So you do have to do a little bit of conversion, and unfortunately, that's just something you have to deal with. I found that it's a little bit easier to remove an asterisk than to add one. So on the Slack side, I have just a quick global substitution for the doubles into singles. Okay, so that is more or less how the app works. So let's go ahead and add something else that might be interesting to our users. So if we think about someone has all this information about all the equipment, all of its stats, the level requirements, what might they be interested in knowing? Well, if someone has joined the game and they're just leveled up to level 30, for example, they might want to know, what can I use at level 30 as a level 30 Oracle or a level 30 Bandit? Like, what do I have available to me? So let's write actually a new response function that will handle that. So what we're going to need is, first off, we need to check to see if we have the capability to provide all that information in our models. Well, we can check our schema, and we do have, you know, the name of the weapon, all the classes that need to equip it, and the level that's required. So we don't have to add anything else to our database models because it's just already there. What we do need, though, is some way to grab that information and hand it to the user in an easy way. So let's make another helper method and maybe even an entirely new helper class in this case. Let's make an info helper that will allow us to populate this with all the things people might ask generally about a different piece of equipment or an item in the game. So let's go info B. And we're going to make this a module so that you can use it kind of in any different place in the application without instantiating. Now, the difference, if anyone's unsure, in a basic sense between a module and a class, is a module doesn't need an instance sort of by design to call its methods. It's sort of just a thing that exists by itself or as a part of something else. You aren't going to have an object that belongs to the info class, for example. So we're going to go module info, and we're going to make a recommend method. And I apologize if I get a little quiet, because thinking and talking and typing at the same time can be a little bit difficult. So we want two pieces of information from somebody to make a recommendation for them. And let's say we want their class, and you actually can't use the word class because that's a reserved word in Ruby, but you can use class name as our variable and the level that they are. This is creating a method for people to get recommendations based on their class and their level. We want to respond with an array of strings, as we normally do, because in Discord, we're going to pop those onto their event. And in Slack, we're going to combine them all together with a new line characters. So an array of strings is really the easiest way to handle passing information to that front layer. So we're going to define a array. We're going to first, we're going to look for any weapons that someone can equip at that level. So we're going to go weapons equals, let's see, weapon where, class name. Now, if we want to use a variable as a symbol, as the name of the column in the database that they're searching for, we're going to need to use the HashRocket syntax. So class name downcase is true. So where the class name for that weapon is present, we will go true. And we can just pass the level is level. We'll do the same thing for accessories. And just quickly and easily copy that down. Our class name, just making sure that everything still works the same. So if we don't find any, say someone says, what can I use as a level 99 troubadour, which doesn't exist in the game? We're not going to get any results in these queries. And we want to tell them that. We want to tell them something that's going to help them. So we're going to say, unless there are weapons or accessories, that's kind of like saying, if there are not weapons and accessories both. I know some people can have difficulty with the unless syntax unless they're used to it. You'll return, again, in an array, because we're expecting an array, we're going to provide an array. Spell recommendations. And interpolation is the pound in Ruby. We're just providing them an easy and friendly message that, like, hey, maybe there's something wrong there. So if we don't have weapons or accessories, we will hand them that string. If we do, we want to do something with them. We want to format them nice. Now, this makes me realize we don't have an easy way to sort of pass a large list of items to the user without just flooding the chat with loads and loads. Because if we go back and look at what the formatted message looked like. It was like 6 or 7 lines long. That's too much. So we're going to actually want to make a new helper to provide a little bit more condensed information. So let's go back to format, because we're going to make a new way to format information. Let's go, let's see, we want, it's like equipment info, but simple. So I'm going to make a module method simple info. We'll take in a piece of equipment. And in this case, we probably just want a single line. We just want, because we're going to probably have sometimes, 15, 20 results. We don't want to flood the chat again. So single line for each. We're going to want the title of the piece of equipment. So in title case, equipment name. And we are interpolating properly, yes. And then the stats, and we're going to put that in parentheses just to keep it nice and neat. And in this case, with our normal formatting string, they're tab separated, and we want to actually replace those with spaces to tighten it up a little bit. Fitting a lot of tabs onto one line might be difficult. So we're going to do a quick gsub here. Let's see, when you gsub, you do need to use double quotes for the literal tab character, and just replace that with a space. And is that all we're going to need? We've got the name, we've got the stats, and if we look at the equipment info, bonuses. Do we want to talk about bonuses? Probably not in full detail, but we can kind of have a string there. Is there more? And if they're interested in learning more about that item, we can ask them to just simply search up that item to get the full details. But it's nice to know that there's something extra there. I want to make sure that I'm interpolating this properly, because that could cause problems. There we go. So we're going to add plus bonus if there are any. So we can use sort of an inline conditional statement here to add plus bonus, let's say, unless equip bonus empty. Let me double check that everything looks fine here. Oh, this line's too long. We can split up long lines. Leave like this. And Rubocop has stopped complaining. Perfect. So that's going to give us just a quick, here's the name of the weapon, here's what it gives you, and does it have a bonus? And if people want to learn more, they can use the weapon command. So we've got that nice helper for us. So we can go ahead and start actually pulling together what we grab from our weapons list. So if there are weapons, now what are we going to want to do? If there are weapons, we're going to want to add to that, that array of strings. So that info is our array, and we're going to have a quick header here, weapons. And for each, if anyone's unfamiliar with how blocks work like that in Ruby and you're brand new, I'm sure the people in chat would be happy to help. And I'm sure Andy will let me know if there are any questions that are specific to what I'm doing, because it's very hard to type code and pay attention to the chat at the same time. So in that weapon block, it's going to take each weapon and pass the simple info of that weapon. And that is, of course, as long as the format module is available. So that's why we have all of our imports, all our require statements here on the top level. And that reminds me, we're adding a new one here. So we're going to have to go require lib helpers info. Cool. So that's what we do if there are any weapons. Now, what is Rubocop complaining about? Use a guard clause. That's okay, because we're going to have another clause yet. So if weapons, put the weapons heading on, and you know what? Let's go ahead and make that bold. Why not? And for Discord, it's going to be double. You know what? I'm not going to mess with that right now. Out of scope. So if weapons, accessory is going to be pretty much the same thing. But the reason we're going to have these as separate blocks instead of combining them together is we do want to, if there are accessories, add that accessories header. And for, should have done multi-select for that, but I'll do it for this. So again, it'll grab the simple info, which is why those mix-ins are so helpful, because that all the information that belongs to a weapon is a trait from equipment, and same thing with accessories, because they pretty much act the same, except they go in different equipment slots. So at the end, we've got this info array. We're just going to go ahead and return that. And that should be it for our base recommend class. I hope Andy will shout at me if I've got any issues here, but we'll run into errors when we actually run it, if there are any. So now that we've got sort of the heart of that, we've got to add the skin. So what is the user going to see, and how are they going to call that class? So we're going to make this a Slack command first. And just like how our accessory works, we're going to be like operator, and what was it? Recommend. And there's a reason why I have a space here. The way that the Slack commands work, we're kind of doing a bit of a hack. So the operator is meant to be like addition, subtraction, like anything that can appear in the middle of a string. The Slack bot normally only actually responds when you address it directly, but we don't want it to work that way. We want it to be able to listen in and respond accordingly. So we're using an operator to allow it to scan anything and give us a match if there are any. So we're going to make the input. You know, I hadn't decided what to do with this yet. So before, maybe we should write the help command. Give us a bit of guidance here. Usually when you think about how a user is going to use something, it helps you sort of determine how you should design it from their perspective. So we're going to recommend, I'm going to ask them for a class, for a level. Equipment. Available a given class level. Cool. So now we kind of understand how they're going to use it. We can start thinking about what we need to do about it. So we're going to have the match, and we're going to want to split that up into a class name. I believe this is okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Will.
I had to completely restart Chrome. It had gotten locked up. Something got gummed up in the gears there, I think, when I was trying to juggle multiple sources, and it just couldn't handle it for too long. So might be a memory leak or something, but we're good now.
What computer are you running on?
Well, I'm running on a 7-year-old tower running Manjaro Linux.
You think that might have anything to do with it?
No, it has nothing to do with it. Okay, so I'm going to get my screen back and ready. When I have to get back into a browser window, I'm going to have to go through this again because all of my windows closed, all my tabs closed. But okay, so when we last talked, what we were doing is attempting to create sort of a basic recommendation engine for people to provide what class they're playing as and the level that they're at and what can I use at this level, or like maybe they're just about to hit level 65 and about 20 more hours of gameplay from level 64, and they just want to know like what can I look forward to then. So what we're doing is we're destructuring here our match expression parameter. Oops, we don't want to delete that. Into our the first variable there, the first argument after the recommend command is going to be the class name and then the level. So once we've got those together, or separately rather, we can actually start searching. So if we have both, we can go ahead and proceed. And we'll deal with the negative case afterward. And level. Let's do the else. This is going to be both. I don't have my snippet set up to make this quick and easy. So we're going to basically take a recommendation from our simple info and combine that into the response and then push that forward to the user. So we're going to use info recommend, which as we just built, passes us an array of strings of all of the listed recommended items. And it wants, just like we did, the class name and level. We're going to join that, because this is Slack, not Discord, with the new line character. And we're going to, because this is Slack, substitute the, actually could write a convenience method for that, probably should. Change out the double asterisks for single asterisks. So I should make like a Slackify and a Discordify just off of the base string, maybe with some markdown. That's too long, says you. Let's just multi-line that sucker. Now, once we've got the response, all we have to do is ask the bot to say it. So client.say channel, the channel that it was sent from, the same channel that we want to respond to, and we want to actually type channel, not SNL. And the text we want to send is just that response variable, because it is a joined string block. So what happens if we don't find either of those things? Well, we kind of want to provide some useful information to the user. So we're just going to send them a direct response. Whoops. I've got my hotkeys mixed up because I work on a Mac and I play in Linux, and the key combinations are not the same. So we've got our channel, same, and we're going to send them just a straight up string here. We're not going to try and interpolate this with any information. So single quotes is fine. We're going to tell them how to use the command. And I got to spell that right. So we have, going back to where we started here, we have our info module, which provides us that recommend function that we just built, where it takes all of the weapons and all the accessories that match our parameters, which is the list of classes and the list of, and the level. And then if we don't early exit on none of those exist, we add the list of simple info of each of those things. And remember, the simple info is that nice little convenience method that we built here. And this doesn't look right to me, the syntax highlighting, but I'm going to trust it until we actually run a trial by fire. And then once we got that, we just hand that in as the response, and we should be good to go. So that really should be all we need to add another feature to our bot. So let's actually just go and make sure that it works. We've got that new helper. We're going to turn off Discord because we didn't write the Discord version of that command, not yet. I'll do that later. So we just got to do slackbot.run. And since running through this file is in our default rake task, we're just going to go rake, and that should run our Slack bot. I'm going to, while that's loading, open my Slack instance in another window because I had to close it to get the stream working again. So it looks like successfully connected to Will's test Slack. So I'm going to go ahead now and pull up the Slack window, and we can play with this a little bit. Application window, Slack, boom. So I just started up a empty Slack channel for this. So all you would need to do is authorize your app through the Slack API. So that's all available through their development portal. And then you invite the bot to the channel. So you can see I already invited DragonBot to the channel. So we can just, oh, that doesn't look right. We can actually address it directly in Slack. This is kind of the way it naturally works. We can address it directly and say, help, tell me what you do. And it'll list all of the commands that we have available. And those are the ones that we defined earlier. So this recommend one is the one that we just built. So let's say I am, fingers crossed that this works because I haven't tried this live yet. Recommend, let's see, warrior level 40. Oh, it did not work. So I've got a problem here. Something did not go in right. Of course, that's always going to be the thing. You're going to have to debug a little bit. So let's walk through this quickly, step by step, to make sure that it's doing everything we expect it to. Unfortunately, with the Slack version of the bot, the way that their logging works by default is it's very super verbose, but it takes it over completely. You can't just simply print directly to the console like you can with the Discord bot. So actually, it's probably a better idea when you're building both to test things in the Discord bot first and then port things over to Slack once you're sure that the stuff behind the method is working. So let's quickly go over to it. It was responding to this, so we were getting the operator properly. If class name and level, because we do need both of those things. We're doing our expression or our assignment properly because that's going to be an array. But you know what we're going to do a quick debug? We're actually going to send a message back. We're going to respond directly with what the class name and level are. So in the channel, the text is going to be, let's do an interpolated string. Let's do CN. That's going to be class name. And level is just going to be L. Often the first step of debugging is just knowing what you're working with. So what variables are we getting? And once we've confirmed that we have what we think we have, we can go ahead and move forward. So I'm restarting the bot. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually, I didn't write any of that in the visible chat because I have the other window open. I apologize for that. So I did just reboot the bot. And let's say Oracle 25. Okay, so we do have properly here the text that we were expecting as didn't actually come through. The level is wrong, so it's not actually split. So we didn't do that parallel assignment properly, and that is something that I'm sure Andy is shaking his head right now. So let me actually switch screens back real quick so people actually know what I'm doing and don't copy the mistake instead of the fix.
Sorry, Will, I missed it.
You missed it. Okay, so the reason why this didn't work is because we don't have an array yet. We just have the match expression, so we have to split it first to be able to assign it in parallel. So there's our debugging for us. And now we will stop the app and run it again with our rake command. And I'm not going to swap screens because all I'm going to do right now is just make sure that I'm getting the input that I'm expecting. Okay, so now I'm getting properly the class and the level. So that's what I was expecting. So we're almost there. Now we just need to make sure that we're searching the database properly. So that might be our next direction. Where did my, okay. So what are we doing next? If there is a class name and a level, we should go into the next block. And if not, then we go into the else block, which is the try recommended class. So I'm going to quickly check my chat to see if I got that second message. And no, I didn't. So it is properly actually asking it's getting into this block for the next step. So it's going to be something here is going wrong. Info.recommend. Recommend, did I spell recommend right? That's a question. So we've got the info module, we've got recommend. We're in the Slack bot. Just going through my head real quick, did we do our import? Because is info available? It would complain, I believe, but it probably wouldn't tell us in the console, because as I said, the Slack bot is a little bit rude with what it'll do to your console. It kind of takes over completely. So we do have that require helpers info. So that should be available to our Slack bot, our slack.rb. Recommend class name level. Recommend class name level. Is something going wrong here? Rubocop is complaining about the line length. That's not important right now. Everything is properly closed. We've got the module def self recommend. So I want to just make sure right here that it is getting. So here's an interesting troubleshooting step. We're going to skip the bot altogether, and we're going to run this in IRB. So let's comment that out. Let's close the bot. And I don't have the chat open, but if anyone sees where I went wrong, let Andy know, and I'm sure he'll share it with me. So we're going to run an interactive Ruby session, and we're going to require, let's see. This will require our DragonBot file, which has all of the rest of our require statements in it. And now what we should be able to do is, for example, weapon.first. What's the first weapon? So we do get a result from that. So we are connecting to our active record instance properly. We're getting some warnings here, but as I said, that's because we're using an older version of these gems, and there are warnings upcoming for Ruby 3.0 because it changes the way certain things work. So we do know that it's working. We're actually getting the proper information for what would be the first weapon in the database. So what we can do now is we also have info. So we can directly ask, let's see, info, oops, I'm not typing up there. Info.recommend. And let's say Shinobi and level 20. What can you get for me? Aha, we have a problem. Uninitialized constant info accessories. That's why. And that's why we were having a problem, because it's accessory. We pluralized our class, and that we shouldn't have. So in Active Directory, your classes are always going to be, this describes a weapon. This describes a accessory. So you're not going to call accessories when you're looking for an accessory or a list of accessories. You're going to look for accessory, and that was our problem. So that should be good now. Let's actually just exit, try requiring all that to run it and see, just to make sure that it works properly before we do it live. There we go, we got it. So this is all the information that we want to be able to pass to our Slack bot. And now with all that done, I'll just move this out of the way. It should work, fingers crossed. So we can, again, exit out of our interactive Ruby session, uncomment our Slack bot, and rake will get us to our Slack bot instance. Successfully connected, cool. So I'm confident now. I'm pretty confident. I'm going to share the Slack screen again, and let's do it live. Okay, so recommend, let's see, Empress level 40. Perfect, that's exactly what we were looking for. So it gives us, as I mentioned, those are gonna be arrays of strings that get added together, the weapons, all the weapons that I could potentially use at level 40 and all the accessories. Now we could do some better formatting because it doesn't look great. I've got obviously some poor interpolation because I'm missing a parenthesis, and this bonus, as we wanted, only appears after weapons that have them, not on weapons and accessories that don't. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works. That's a demonstration of how to add new features to it, and basically all we have to worry about from this point is how we're going to host it. We could, like I showed you right now, just host it on our local computers, or you could, if you want, host it on a DigitalOcean droplet or any server, really, like I said, that has an internet connection so it can reach out to those APIs, or it has a Ruby interpreter. So one thing that is probably the easiest for most people to use is Heroku. So that's why, like I said, way off at the top, we have this proc file, which tells it or kind of gives it a hint that, hey, this is a Ruby file. So if we wanted to create a Heroku app, we just install the Heroku CLI and go Heroku create. And it's going to, from the folder that it is currently in, look around. What do I see here? Okay. We do have those environment variables, which is where we're going to be storing our Discord token, our Slack API token, and our Ruby environment. So from here, we would go Heroku config add, I believe it is, the name of the environment. So it would be Ruby env equals production, let's say. You would add your API tokens and what environment you want it to run in. And then from there, we should have Git remotes. So let's see our list, verbose, and we do have Heroku there. So we can go git push. Oh, first we want to commit because we want to commit all the changes we just made. Git add commit, add recommendations. Cool, and now we go git push Heroku master. And when it pushes, sort of Heroku is going to run a lot of checks against the application that you pushed up. And it found that there are hints there that it is a Ruby project. It sees the gem file, it sees the proc file with the rake task there. And it's going to start installing all the dependencies. It's going to run our bundle install. It's going to basically get the app ready. And once we have everything pushed there, it's going to be pretty much ready to go. We do have to think about migrating the database over. So there is a quick README in the repository for this project, which is just underneath the YouTube channel window, that you can go through a quick how to set up the database that I exported. So you can play around with this information yourself and give it a try. If not, you can just use the skeleton of the project and add whatever data to it you want or start from scratch. World's your oyster. So that's pretty much all that I had to show. I apologize for having my Slack window showing and not my Andy asleep at the wheel. Instead of having my console where I was typing all those Heroku commands. But being the person who has to both change and run the sources is a little bit funny. But that's pretty much it for the presentation. Does anyone have any questions? I'll be keeping an eye on the chat now. I had to close it, unfortunately, because my world ended. But let's go to YouTube. I don't need to open.
I'm not sure you want to run YouTube on the live stream while you're...
You can, just to get the chats. I usually
pop... can, but it's going to be a link and it's just going to confuse people.
Yeah, I'm just popping the chat window up so I can respond if anyone is asking any questions. Yeah, so if anyone...
I haven't seen anything yet.
No? Okay, cool. Yeah, so if anyone does want to know a little bit more about the project, like I said, I do have the repository listed below this window. And if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask personally, I'm on the Dev Edmonton Slack, and so is Andy and a bunch of other helpful people. So hope to see you there, and I guess that's it for this month. If anyone would like to follow up, if anyone's got something cool that they want to show off, that they'd spend a little bit of time on, or something they just want to learn and teach themselves, gives them an excuse to spend the time on a project, then please let us know. We would love to showcase anything cool or anything interesting.
Now, one more thing, just so that everyone's aware, our next meetup is scheduled for June 6th. I haven't spoken to Will about whether or not we'll continue right through the summer or not. Mm-hmm. I know in the past that we have. we'll evaluate it for this year.
Yeah.
But we're looking for presenters. So if you have anything that you're interested in presenting, please contact either of us or both or somebody else, and they'll contact us. Just find a way to get us the message, carrier pigeon, it doesn't matter. We look forward to getting any comments.
Yeah. Well said, Andy. And thanks again. See you next time.